Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is a US election special news update. There's been so much happening in the world of American politics that I have to do another video. It's going to be jam-packed full of lots of content. I'll try and race through it. We're going to start with explaining the Electoral College voting system slightly because we're going to be talking about it. Somebody asked me again about this recently. This is the map as we see it at the moment. 225 Electoral College votes in the bag for Harris and Walz. 219 in the bag for Trump and Vance, by making solid predictions about what is likely to happen on the map, and 94 toss-ups, which is, well, not quite sure, could go either way. Now, instead of being a popular vote, whereby if you just count up all the votes in America and whoever gets the most votes gets to be president, that's not actually how it works, because if it was how it worked, Hillary Clinton would have got voted in back in 2016. She won the most votes by about 2 million or more votes. She got more than Trump. But she got them in the wrong places. So California, very solidly Democrat. If you have, say, 2 million extra votes there, and yet all the other states are really close, then yeah, Hillary Clinton won California easily, but she's piled all her extra votes into that state and still only going to get her 54 Electoral College votes. And all these other states that are much closer, Trump may picked there and picked there and picked there, and that meant that he won more or the requisite number of Electoral College votes to become president. And so there are 538 Electoral College votes, which is why you get websites like 538, because it's reflecting the number of Electoral College votes. And they are correlated largely with the population in each of these states, but not exactly. And the reason is because, say, let's take California, it has a massive population. So it gets 50, based on the census data, you apportion representatives from the House of Representatives to these districts that reflect population sizes. So California gets 52 districts, and that's a number of representatives in the House of Representatives they get to elect. And there's, say, I forget what it is exactly. You would think it's 538 minus 100 because you get 100 senators. So it's 438. But actually, it depends whether there are special elections and people not in place and whatnot. But around 430 odd representatives in the House of Representatives, that lower house. And then you get the Senate above it with 100 senators. And that's because there are 50 states and you get 2 senators per state. So California will get 52 representatives going to the lower house and 2 senators going to the upper house, and then you get the president, and that's a trifecta. So you can win the presidential debate but lose the Senate and lose control of the House of Representatives, and that means you've got a problem because you've got a president of one party but the other 2 houses of the other parties, or any mix thereof, right? And the best thing you would want as a party is to win the trifecta, which is all 3, both houses in Congress and the president. Okay, so when it comes to smaller states, however, this is where it gets slightly skewed in terms of not quite representing population. And this is where you also the system skews towards Republicans. So because rural states are generally Republican states, you get electoral votes that are not as representative as California. Say, for example, California has those 2 extra senators are thrown in on already 52 representatives, and so they are diluted. Whereas if you go to someone like Alaska, where you have 1 representative because there's not many people live there, real rural states, and then Montana up here is another example. You get 2 districts essentially for representatives to go into the lower house, and then you get 2 senators to go into the upper house. So those 2 senators are split over only 2 representatives, or a much smaller population, which means that which means that the Republicans overwhelmingly winning these smaller rural states means that they are more likely to have distilled power in those in those senators. The Electoral College system skews towards smaller rural states in terms of your bang for your buck with regard to Electoral College votes, and that is something the Democrats always have to overcome, and that's a kind of reflection in a larger, if we're talking about a larger conversation about politics, of this rural-urban divide that you get around the world, which is where the rural rural areas generally tend to skew conservative, and urban areas, with their kind of mixing of huge populations and normalization of differences, generally tend to skew liberal. And if you've got an electoral system that somewhat represents that divide, urban-rural divide, then one way or the other, so if there's more power or less power to rural or urban areas, that will mean that there's less or more advantage to liberals or conservatives, depending on how it's set up. So in the US, the conservatives, the rural areas, get just a tiny bit more power. The system skews towards favouring Republicans. Okay. Now, that aside, that was just because someone wanted to explain that to me again. North Carolina is a battleground state that is a bit of a toss-up at the moment, although some interesting polls that have just come out from New York Times Siena, but we'll come to that later. North Carolina is somewhere where the Democrats are being led to believe that actually they've got a chance of winning now. And part of why they've got a chance of winning, well, more so at the moment, is because Mark Robinson, the prospective governor from the Republican camp, is running there, and he's been embroiled in some serious scandals. So he's a guy that I played a video of some time back, talking about advocating for the death of liberals.
You know, it was a time when we used to meet evil on the battlefield, and guess what we did to it? We killed it. We didn't quibble about it. We didn't argue about it. We didn't fight about it. We killed it. Some liberal somewhere is going to say that sounds awful. Too bad. Get mad at me if you want to. Some folks need killing.
He's not talking about an idea here. He's literally talking about people.
It's time for somebody to say it. It's not a matter of vengeance. It's not a matter of being mean or spiteful. It's a matter of necessity. It's time to call out those guys in green and go have them handled.
So he's basically talking about like killing liberals, the army going around killing liberals. And this was like really controversial. Mark Robinson, oh my goodness. Well, anyway, he has been embroiled in this scandal that CNN has reported, where they've got hold of posts of his from some time back, when he's for some time he's been suspected of going to what used to be sort of video shops, where because of the rules you couldn't rent pornographic videos out, or it was a bit more difficult, so you could watch them in a back room, depending on what the rules were in certain states. So he used to go and watch a lot of these, and he was quite known for it. So that's been hanging around as a rumor. And then they've got hold of pornographic website comments sections, where he has been splurging all sorts of insane stuff. And this has now come out, and everyone's like, oh my goodness, surely you can't run. But he's staying in the race. He's refusing to give up. And that is interesting in itself. So aside from that, well, part of that rhetoric of like liberals should be killed, he's railed against transgender people. He's railed against sexual I guess freedoms, if you like, LGBT, etc., etc. And yet, from these comments threads that have been outed, he's been found to have said all sorts of crazy stuff. And yeah, just is absolutely incredible. If you go and look at what he has said and some of the things he said previously. So this is to be added onto a long line of crazy things this man has said. So as this article states, Robinson, who would become North Carolina's first black governor if elected, also repeatedly maligned civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., attacking him in such intense terms as a user accused him of being a white supremacist. So you've got a black governor nominee being accused of being a white supremacist. Quote, get that effing commie B off the National Mall. Robinson wrote about the dedication to the memorial to King, Martin Luther King, in Washington, D.C. by then President Barack Obama. I'm not in the KKK. They don't let blacks join. If I was in the KKK, I would have called him Martin Lucifer and then a black derogatory word. Robinson responded. Robinson's history of controversial remarks, including mocking school shooting survivors, his past support for total abortion bans without exceptions for rape or incest, and disparaging the civil rights movement, have been a consistent theme in his race. Recent public polling shows Robinson is losing to Stein. So he's losing against his Democratic counterpart. And some of the things that were said are pretty, I mean, I can't repeat a lot of them. In fact, CNN has said we can't print a lot of what he said because it's so dodgy. As it says here, CNN is not publishing the graphic sexual details of Robinson's story. Quote, I went peeping again. So this is, like, some of what he said is that he used to go peeping and looking through the event covers that overlooking the showers in the girls' changing rooms and so on and so forth. And then this is a lot of comments on this Nude Africa website where he discussed his affinity for, who knew it, transgender pornography. Oh my goodness, you just couldn't write this. I like watching tranny on girl porn. He says, that's effing hot. It takes the man out while leaving the man in. And yeah, I'm a perv too. So you can imagine the sort of stuff that has now become public about what he said. And of course, as someone that rails against sexual liberation and divergence, right, who has railed against transgender transgender rights and so on and so forth, for someone to be caught having said all these things, it just shows rank hypocrisy. And if you are a true conservative who would otherwise agree with what he says normally, then you're going to have some serious cognitive dissonance in your head. So like he basically, you know, says, I'm a black Nazi. That is what he has said. And, you know, you can see those comments here in the CNN report. This is not going down well. He is being absolutely hammered, for, and rightly so, for saying these sorts of things. But he's not pulling out of his race. So Robinson says he's staying in the North Carolina governor race after the bombshell CNN report. He's said some other things he said. So on the, you know, I'm a black Nazi is one of them. And on another occasion, he supported slavery coming back. Slavery is not bad, he said. Some people need to be slaves. I wish they'd bring it back. I would certainly buy a few. Just absolutely incredible. And then you can see in 2012, he was caught saying that he would prefer Adolf Hitler to be in charge over any of the shite that's in Washington. Yes, loads of sexually graphic stuff. Anyway, yeah, you can go and read all of what he said. I probably don't need to go on. Then hits keep on coming. As per Politico, his email address is belonging, you know, the one belonging to Mark Robinson, was also registered on Ashley Madison. So if you remember the Ashley Madison scandal, it's a very good documentary on Netflix, I think, on it. Ashley Madison was this website, I think it's still going actually, that where people could be married and then go on, use it as a kind of dating app to go and meet people to have affairs with. And if you are a conservative who abhors extramarital affairs and the sanctity of marriage, etc., and if you are a politician running for office on the basis of that kind of ideology, then you probably shouldn't be associated with Ashley Madison. But there you go. Part of the party of family values is at it again, says Brian Tyler Cohen. Okay, now where this starts getting even more problematic for the Republicans is that he's not only been endorsed by Trump. Trump has waxed lyrical about him on quite a number of occasions. I've just got two of them here for you.
Thanks as well to, I think, one of the hottest politicians in the United States of America.
So yeah, you can call this hyperbole, but he is saying this person who is absolutely covered in scandal is one of the hottest things in American politics.
Become a friend of mine.
He's a friend.
Lieutenant Governor Mark
Personal.
Robinson. Thank you, Mark. Great. You're incredible, incredible wife. Thank you very much. Thanks.
You're incredible. Thank you very much. And then he said this about him.
or sooner if possible.
That's right.
I just want to thank everybody, whatever you can do to help Mark and Yolanda win this election. You know, he's got a tough opponent, not a good opponent, but a tough opponent, a political person, and it's not going to be that easy. He's a star, but a lot of times people say, well, this is going to be easy for him, and then they forget to vote. They don't go out to vote. You got to get out and vote, but you got to help him financially because you're all people that have a lot of money. I know 20 of you, and you're rich as hell. So anything you are going to do, it quadruple it. It doesn't mean it's it's just, you know. But
let's go.
Somebody that we have to be very, very careful. We have to cherish. We have to cherish Mark. He's a star. You have to cherish him. It's like a fine wine because that's what you have. You have a fine wine. He's an outstanding person. I've gotten to know him so well and fairly quickly.
I've got to know him so well and fairly quickly. He's an outstanding person like a fine wine, right? And then this happens. So what does that say about Trump's character assessment, his evaluation? You can say the same about when Trump was in charge in 2016 to 2020. He said, I only make the best appointments. And then he fired a load of people and loads of people left. And you're like, well, if they're the best appointments, what's going on there? And then 40 out of 44 of his administration are not endorsing him. Like, either he's made amazing appointments, and as a result of these people being so good, they realise how crap Trump is, in which case you can agree he's made these amazing appointments, and therefore you have to agree with what their evaluation of Trump is, or he makes terrible appointments because they all quit or are all fired because they realise how terrible Trump is or whatever. So you can't... The evidence of what Trump presents, of his judgment, the evidence is that his judgment is terrible. I'm absolutely certain of that, and the evidence supports that. So the question is, how is this going to affect the election in North Carolina? Now, the other thing to say, by the way, is Trump also said that Mark Robinson is like Martin Luther King on steroids. So he takes this iconic black human rights leader and says Mark Robinson's even better than that, when Mark Robinson says that Martin Luther King's statue, that so we find out now, should be taken down, blah, blah, blah. So if you like Martin Luther King and you've got Trump appealing to you, being very much a Martin Luther King fan, and saying, well, Mark Robinson's like Martin Luther King times 10, then either, again, Trump's evaluation is entirely incorrect, or he's been duped by someone who is clearly not Martin Luther King on steroids. It's just all over problematic for the Republican ticket, and certainly for winning the governorship here. So I don't think he's going to win the governorship. But the question is, how will this affect further up the ticket? So you talk about down ticket races sometimes get affected by the presidential debate, or the presidential landscape, sorry. So if you've got someone who's tanking in the presidential election, then that can filter down onto people further down the ticket. And so this is why Biden, you had so much pressure on Biden from Democrats, because they were feeling the pressure down tickets of Biden's lack of popularity, and that waning popularity, and being too old, and people starting to suffer. So that's why they were complaining centrally. But it can go the other way as well. So you can have Trump's popularity get hit because Republican down ticket, in this case governor nominee, is so deeply unpopular and so mired in scandal that it can affect whether people are going to vote for the Republican presidential nominee as well. And we just don't know at the moment. There's an early poll in that actually suggests that Trump's doing much better all of a sudden, but I would take that with a huge pinch of salt. So anyway, just on top of Robinson saying he's going to stay in, basically it says several senior campaign officials for Mark Robinson stepped down. I believe actually that most of them might have stepped down. There's only very few people left in his team. So he's going to really, really struggle. Now, although they may lose the governor race, how will it affect the presidential race? And we just don't know for sure.
Well, first, Allison, thanks for having me on. It did track with what I've been hearing from sources. And the timing on this is very interesting for when this came out. This came out very, very, very late. My understanding is people have had this for months and have held on to it for a moment like this because.
So this is very similar to, and I think this is a CNN guy that broke it. It's very similar to the October surprise, which is where you keep hold of something and then you hit it just before the elections to give maximum damage. So this might well have been strategically released and so that it gives maximum damage and there's not enough time to get another governor into that role. And that plays to the advantage of the Democrats here.
Because it is a tight deadline in North Carolina for a candidate to withdraw, and this is putting the Republican Party in the defensive to have to answer for whether they want Lieutenant Governor Robinson to be their nominee.
And Brian,
Okay, lots more to talk in that video as well, lots more discussion on that topic, but we're just going to quickly go on to say that Fox News is just reporting here. Actually, it's a New York Times Siena poll, but they say Harris in Arizona is leading by 5 points. In fact, let's go to I think I do have it. Sorry. Don't know why I showed you the Fox News one. The actual New York Times here showing Trump shows sign of strength in the Sunbelt battlegrounds. This is just out as far as I know. So these are new polls, and why this is significant is what I was going to be reporting to you later is that all the polls are basically breaking in favour of Harris at the moment. There's a real alignment of the polls that should give Harris some great confidence going into late September and moving on into October. So the polls are definitely the friend of Harris at the moment, and favorability ratings is all going in her favour. But then you suddenly get these polls that are from New York Times Siena, and these are in 3 battleground states that are super important. These are border states. So the question is, how is immigration playing in Arizona? Not so much. Well, no, actually, Sunbelt. No, Arizona is. So Arizona's an interesting one because that you can argue that is about the border. Georgia and North Carolina, actually, not so much. But these are super important states. So just to show you the map, we have Georgia here, and North Carolina, and Arizona, and these are very, very important for working out paths to victory. Now, to be fair, like I've said to you before, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Like I've said to you before, Pennsylvania, if Pennsylvania goes in favour of the Democrat, or either side actually, then 19 is an awful lot. There's a big old number, and that's likely to mean that Wisconsin and Michigan are going to go in the same direction, and that means whoever gets Pennsylvania is likely to win. But there are these different combinations whereby you can get North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and of course if you win electoral votes, it's a zero-sum game, so the other person loses them. So effectively it goes from 11 from one side, plus 11 from one side, to plus 11 to the other side, and that's a difference of 22. So this is really super important. So North Carolina, Georgia and Arizona are incredibly important battleground Sunbelt states, and this New York Times Siena poll actually shows Trump in 5 points ahead in Arizona. So that's huge, outside the margin of error, I would have thought. 4 points up in Georgia and closer to being only 2 points up in North Carolina. Now, the caveat, I guess, in favour of Kamala Harris is that the New York Times Siena polls generally skew Republican. They are often doomy for the Democrats. And if you just look at polls in general, so if I go to look at presidential polls on 538, and I doubt they've got those Times ones on there yet. So we look at presidential polls, they're all blue. Like this whole page is blue. So these are national polls, by the way, not state by state. But it seems very clear that the polls are skewing. There's just a couple there. New York Times Siena, again, 2 of those ones there showing a Trump +1, but not in line with all these other polls. And so that then leads you to understand that the Times Siena aren't always very kind to the Democrats. The average at the moment is 2.9 in favour of Harris in the polls. But these three battleground state polls are certainly going to be a worry for the Democrats, and they need to keep a tight. They need to keep a close eye on these tight races. What would otherwise be tight races, but actually this poll seems to show that Arizona is firmly in Trump's camp, and Georgia as well. So watch the North Carolina one to see the effect that the scandal with Mark Robinson, that the effect that might have on the polls. Although these polls, I think, were up to the 21st, and that scandal had already sort of broken, and there seems to be minimal effect. In fact, Trump seems to be having a good time of it down in North Carolina. So, as I say, just keep an eye on that one. Now, it's interesting. Tim Walz here talking. How can you always? It's always going to be the case that when you're giving a speech and your speechwriter is going to be working on this, is like, how do I take elements of the news that's happened here and twist it, or not twist it, represent it in a way that is beneficial for the campaign or sounds good in the speech, so on and so forth. And this is how Tim Walz, I think, has reflected the "I'm a black Nazi" claim from Mark Robinson.
That iron from the northern Minnesota Iron Range fueled the steel mills here right in the Lehigh Valley.
So, by the way, just to give you context, Lehigh Valley is the area in Pennsylvania that is if the Democrats win Lehigh Valley and Northeast, they will win Pennsylvania. And if they win Pennsylvania, they win the election, essentially. So if you want to be campaigning anywhere, this is freaking exactly where you want to be campaigning. And that's important to know. So it's important to know that they are going to difficult or contentious or borderline places to try and get as much of the vote as they possibly can. And here he's appealing to the mining, to the manufacturing, to that Rust Belt kind of the working class element of this district. And here he's going to bring in Mark Robinson.
Together, it was our people that built the tanks that won World War II and freed the world from Nazi oppression. And I don't know if you noticed Nazi tyranny. We got folks running as Republicans for governor that are proud to refer themselves as Nazis. Let's not pretend that there's a gradual difference between the folks that are running here, that they're running together.
So, well said. Linking that to how can I link Mark Robinson and that scandal and himself calling himself a black him calling himself a black Nazi to on the campaign trail in this working class Pennsylvania district. And that's how we do it, building tanks and mining and manufacturing and et cetera, to fighting the Nazis. And here's one that claims he is one. Okay, right. Now we're going on to the next sort of big news thing, which is possibly being underreported. It's about joining these things together. One of the ways that I think the Republicans go about trying to win elections, and I think this has been par for the course for some time now, is try and make it harder for people to vote rather than easier for people to vote. And you make it harder for people to vote, then you disenfranchise people, and you actually, the theory is the fewer people vote, the more chance the Republicans have of winning. So the more you can mobilize, the more excitement you can get, and the more that people come out. Although there is argument that this is changing, that there are more registered Democrats, was a tradition, more registered Democrats. So the more people you get out voting, the more likely is Democrats are going to win. So we want to stop people to come out to vote, and we want to make it hard for them to vote. And if these people are sort of working class people of color, then they're going to be more easy to disenfranchise, because we can stop them from voting by making sure they have to have a certain type of documentation that they're less likely to have than the next person over here. And there have been all of these underhand ways, so the accusations go, that the Republicans have to try and stop people getting out to vote because it benefits them. one of the ways that, and here we get this person, Kazim Rashid, saying, right, Texas has purged about 500,000 eligible voters. They've actually purged 1 million voters off their rolls, but the claim is about 500,000 of them are eligible voters. Oklahoma's purged about 193,000 eligible voters. Take these claims with a pinch of salt, but I'm trying to make a point here. Nebraska potentially changes its electoral count to winner take all, so they all go red. I'll explain that soon. Georgia is now requiring 5 to 6 million votes to be counted by hand. Red states have closed more than 100,000 polling locations in Black and Latino neighborhoods. This is how Republicans are working to steal the 2024 election. So that's his claim. But there's a lot to be said about this. So what you are finding is that and this had been signposted by the Republicans for some time. You had kind of elements of this in Project 2025 literature, but also they've been putting legal impediments in place for some time to make sure that it's difficult for people to vote and that there's chaos around the voting. Then they can start questioning the legality of the electoral results, so on and so forth. So in Georgia, the elections board has just voted, I think, 3-2 to require hand counted ballots, and that is a pretty big thing. So it potentially creates a further delay in the system that took days to deliver the definitive result 4 years ago. So it was criticised for being slow to get the result 4 years ago, and now they're going to make people count millions of votes by hand and not by machine. Georgia's elections board voted 3-2 to require the hand count despite the objections of state officials and poll workers. Around 5 million votes for presidents were cast in Georgia in 2020, with Joe Biden beating Trump in the key battleground state by a margin of around 12,000 only. While hand counting of ballots is common in many countries, including the UK, it's extremely rare in the US. The rule passed on Friday requires 3 poll workers in each of the state's 6,500 voting precincts to begin counting ballots on election night. They warned of delays and possible chaos caused by changing the rules, so this is what objectors said, so close to the election. Early voting in Georgia starts on October the 15th. Election day is on November the 5th. February, so this is someone casting their opinion, warned that the board may not have the legal authority to require hand counting, and the change is almost certain to face legal challenges. Voting rights organizations say hand counting would complicate the voting system and is less accurate than machine counting. Many Republicans, meanwhile, leave Trump's oft-repeated but false claims, believe these claims, that the voting systems are riddled with fraud and have been rigged by Democrats. What this will do is lead to chaos and a delay, and so critics say the delay will allow Republicans to build up a legal challenge to the results as and when they come in. And it also possibly allows greater scope for challenging the results because they're counted by hand, which is seen as actually less accurate, and so on and so forth. This is just one of the many things. This has led Jeff Duncan, the Republican, former Republican lieutenant governor, who is now endorsing Harris, to say this.
But look, these guys aren't interested in winning this election fair and square, and that's by putting a good candidate forward that can actually win. There's no reason why a Republican candidate for president shouldn't be way out in front in the state of Georgia. 8 statewide constitutional officers are Republicans, strong majorities with Republicans in the legislature. The only time a Republican loses in Georgia is when Donald Trump puts his fingers on him. We have 2 U.S. senators to prove that case.
The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports that according to a recent survey conducted by the paper, sizable majorities of Democratic and independent voters in the state believe the election will be fair and accurate, but less than half of Georgia Republicans expressed such confidence. Even with this hand count, if the former president loses in the state, do you think Georgia Republicans will accept that decision?
Well, they're going to have to. Once again, he will have led the losing team. And my hope, look, Anderson, this whole thing from day one for me is not about trying to get popularity. It's about trying to fix the Republican Party. And it needs to start here in Georgia. We are broken at our core as Republicans here in Georgia. We have a state party that is dysfunctional and only solely worships one person and one person only, and that's Donald Trump. He could say jump off a bridge and they would do it. He could say rig an election and they would try to do it. That's exactly what's happening with the state election board.
Absolutely fascinating there. So that's his opinion. Then you got this Texas voter purge, maybe sending a chilling message. Lawmakers and advocates warn voters must check if they're still registered or if they've been placed on a suspended list, which could add more barriers to their votes to count. Democratic state legislators said. Now, this is normal. You purge votes of people that have died, people that have moved away. But there are always these worries that the purges are actually a way in which certain sides can make sure that it's less likely that the other side will be able to vote in the numbers that they were aiming for. And with these purges of getting rid of an awful lot of ineligible voters, they could well get rid of a whole bunch of eligible voters. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, you didn't get to vote. Oh, it turns out those eligible voters were maybe people of colour from certain districts that are really important, and etc., etc. So anyway, more than 1.1 million names have been purged from the rolls in Texas, and the claim is that, you know, a good deal of them have would otherwise be eligible to vote. But, you know, I don't know the exact details here, just, you know, that there are claims going both ways. Republicans are suing more election officials over voter rolls in several battleground states, says CNN here. So this is becoming a bit of a battle in itself, these purges. As of Tuesday, at least 36 cases related to voter rolls and their maintenance are pending in 19 states, according to the liberal-leaning Democracy Docket, which tracks election litigation. So that's a guy called Mark Elias, who's really good, well worth listening to. Some of the lawsuits have been brought by the Republican National Committee against state election officials in the battleground states that are atop both Trump's and Vice President Kamala Harris's must-win lists, including Georgia, Nevada, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The right-wing effort to purge voter rolls has largely centered around claims that non-citizens are casting illegal votes in favor of Democrats, but reports of non-citizen voting in the US elections are extremely rare. The right-leaning Heritage Foundation's database of confirmed fraud cases lists fewer than 100 examples of non-citizens voting between 2002 and 2022. So Heritage Foundation, that's behind the Project 2025 debacle, has their own list of fraudulent cases, or that they're supposed to be like stamping out with these changes, but there's less than 100 cases in 20 years. That is statistically utterly irrelevant, and that's more than 1 billion lawfully cast ballots. It's zero. So that you would be doing things to stop that from happening means that actually there's something else going on here, because that is not an issue you should be worrying about. It is statistically insignificant to a massive degree. The left-leaning Brennan Center for Justice analysed more than 23 million votes from the 2016 election and found an estimated 30 examples. 30 in 23 million is not something you have to go and start changing the rules about. So therefore, the changing of the rules appears to be, I would suggest, having a different objective in mind. Oklahoma purges over 453,000. So it's where this guy said 193,000 of them are eligible of the 453,000 that have been purged. Now, I can't talk to the accuracy of that claim, but that's what you get. So you get one side saying, well, we need to do this. This is voter integrity, and we need to make sure that the people who are eligible to vote are eligible to vote, and those who are ineligible are off the rolls. But if you accidentally get rid of a load of people who are eligible, then, oh, well, sorry, we were trying to do the right thing. And in fact, there are organisations that are trying to look into this. So the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights has a website that looks into exactly this. So their Democracy Diverted polling place. Oh yeah, sorry, this is something slightly different. This is talking about the polling stations that are closed. So the accusation is that there have been all these polling stations closed that are in places that are overwhelmingly Black and Latino neighborhoods. And that means, we want you to vote in this way. We don't want you to turn up on voting. Well, why are you closing them particularly here and not over there? And is that because these particular districts and you're going to try and get them to vote by mail or do something like this, but actually these people generally don't do that, and these people happen to be Black and Latino, and they vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. So there are these prevailing theories that these these polling stations are closed as part of this way of trying to stop people from being able to vote because they are going to vote for the party that you don't want. So anyway, this organisation looks at this in these different states like Texas, and Arizona, etc. So 1,688 polling sites across 13 states have closed in 6 years since a particular legal decision gutted key voter protection. So you did have, I think it is that you had a rule that protected voters, probably with saying you can't close down polling stations, and then that was overturned, and then now you're getting that happening, and of course, yeah, Arizona, they're looking into that, Georgia, all of these really important background states possibly suffering with polling station closures. And then NBC News reporting that Latino groups denounced laws making it harder to help voters with disabilities and language issues. So on and so forth. You get all of these ways of making it more difficult to vote that are being thrown at the courts at the moment very soon before. I mean, I think the timing here is probably fairly relevant, and it doesn't give enough time to build up a defense against these moves. Now, one of the ones that I think is really problematic, and it is all about the timing, is Nebraska's electoral law change. So what the Republicans are trying to do at the moment is so there are 2 states in the US whereby the Electoral College votes aren't done on a statewide basis, that there's actually 2 districts and say, actually, the people over in this part of our state voted in this way, and we're going to give 4 Electoral College votes to whoever wins in this area. But this district is slightly different, and we're going to give, say, 1 Electoral College vote, depending on what this district votes. And it turns out that Nebraska is one of these, where 4 votes generally go to Republicans, and 1 vote, Nebraska's 2nd district, goes towards the Democrats. And what the Republicans are trying to do here, because it skews Republican Nebraska as a whole, is trying to say we want to change that rule so that Nebraska's 2nd district is subsumed by Nebraska as a whole, and instead of it going 4-1, 4 to Republicans, 1 to Democrats, it will go 5 to Republicans. And that's because there is one of the pathways to victory whereby it is pretty much Nebraska's 2nd district that dictates the outcome of the election. Right? And you have to change these numbers around, but basically if you kind of change these grey ones around in a certain way, then Nebraska's 2nd district becomes the deciding Electoral College vote. And what they're doing, what the Republicans have done, which is really significant, is to try and change this close enough to the election such that the Democrats can't reply in kind. Because the other state that has this same rule is Maine. Now, Maine goes towards the Democrats, but it has this Maine 2nd district here that skews towards Republicans. And likewise, if that was subsumed within Maine as a whole, there are these different districts in Maine, then you would lose that Republican Electoral College vote, and it would all become Democrat. But what the Republicans have cleverly done is made this legal challenge so close to the election that the Democrats had threatened, if you do this in Nebraska, we're going to do it in Maine, right? So actually the end result would be we would lose the Electoral College vote in Nebraska, but we'd gain the one in Maine. Because they're doing it just before the election, it doesn't give the Democrats enough time to mount that legal challenge in Maine, but it does give them enough time to do it in Nebraska, which means the Republicans would gain one in Nebraska and still get the one in Maine. Right? So this is a really important and I think fairly underhand move by the Republicans here. So Trump allies make another push to change Nebraska's Electoral College law. There could be a bit of a challenge for them because one of the people they need to get to vote for that change is, I think, a disaffected Republican who is, or was it a disaffected Democrat who's gone over to the Republican side but isn't willing to cross the party lines, one way or the other. So it's going to be possibly a bit difficult for the Republicans to do that. but it could well be done. And if it's done, that is effectively a change of two. So one goes from a Democrat over to Republicans, giving you a change of two. Really, really important that. And definitely, Nebraska is definitely worth watching to see what the outcome of that legal challenge is. But it is certainly one that Democrats are worried about. There are a lot of analysts who are saying, this is an issue. Right, the other big bit of news that's happened is the unions, right? So particularly the Teamster Union. Who are the Teamsters? So the Teamsters Union also affiliates in Canada and Puerto Rico, was created in 1903 the merger of driver associations and now had more than 1 million members. So it's got 1.3 million members. There are nearly 100,000 Teamsters in Pennsylvania, a key swing state in the 2024 race. While a Teamster endorsement doesn't guarantee a win for any candidate, a lack of endorsement may solidify Pennsylvania's role as a battleground state. So what's happened is Teamsters, this huge unions generally prefer the Democrats. Why? Because the Republicans have never been good for unions. They've been trying to de-unionize the country by putting things in place to make it more difficult for there to be collective bargaining, for unions to exist. It's the Republicans that have enabled that move, desired that move. They are the party of the union busting, essentially. And the Democrats have actually more overtly sided with unions recently, with Joe Biden going on a picket line, which was he was the first president ever to have done that. And you've got Kamala Harris right at the beginning of her campaign was giving all these talks to the teachers union, the UAW, the auto workers union, and so on and so forth, really trying to cozy up to the unions to get their vote, and also because actually they better represent unions' desires and agenda with their own policies and much more union-friendly policies. Now, the Teamsters are an interesting one because they're super powerful and they generally support the Democrats, but not always. And they have done this, not private, they've done a survey of their own members whereby the poll has shown, so this survey, well, first of all, they did a survey back in April to July with nearly 300 local Teamsters unions conducting a first-of-a-kind presidential town hall, soliciting endorsement preferences from members via straw polls. The in-person voting was held prior to Biden's withdrawal from the race. So this was a poll that initially was trying to work out whether the Teamsters in general supported Biden over Trump. And actually they did. So 44.3% supported Trump. Supported Biden versus 36.3% of Teamsters supporting Trump. And that's because Biden had this appeal to white working class men in a way that Harris doesn't quite. She's really attracting the young female vote, but that male working class, particularly white working class male vote, is something that she struggles compared to Biden with. And so Trump is looking to capitalize on Biden leaving the race in this demographic. So following the Republican National Convention, so this is interesting. First of all, the head of the Teamster Union spoke to the Republicans. I think it was at the RNC he spoke. And that was deemed a little controversial. He got into a lot of trouble because actually a lot of proper union people were saying, well, actually, the Democrats are the better choice for us. Why are you speaking at the RNC? And there's this tension between kind of culture war stuff and immigration amongst white working class union members in, say, the Teamsters. So there's going to be this tension about wanting to endorse Harris because actually Democrats are better on union agenda, but being someone who's personally in favor of Trump because he's saying really strong things rhetorically on, and also as part of their policy on immigration. Deporting millions upon millions of illegal immigrants is something that maybe working class Teamsters personally agree with, even if from a kind of union point of view, Democrats would be the better choice. So following the RNC, the Biden's campaign exit, the Teamsters commissioned a new national electronic poll of its 1.3 million members, overseen by an independent third party. During a voting window from July 24th to September the 15th, rank and file Teamsters voted 59.6% for the union to endorse Trump, compared to 34% for Harris. complete switcheroo here. In fact, even more so. So 60% of the union supposedly now endorses Trump. Now, there have been lots of criticisms about this. Only 21,000 votes, which is fairly good, actually. You think 21,000 out of 1.3 million is a mere drop in the ocean. But as far as when you do surveys and polls, you usually trying to work out a national voting intention with maybe 5,000, 2,000 voters, right? So 21,000 is all right, but there were claims that it skewed heavily towards a Trump bias in different ways, and people calling this into question. Nonetheless, this was big news. So you had the Teamster union saying, right, we've done our internal polling, and it looks like 60% of our union are in favor of Trump. We don't know what to do now. So what the Teamster union then did was not endorse. So they didn't endorse either candidate. So why the Teamsters didn't endorse Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? And it's because of that tension. They recognised that, it wasn't going to be super popular for them to endorse Trump on the basis of that, because then you would get probably a lot of uproar among the actual like union people that are much more interested in the policy agenda, and they might be the people who are actually in leadership, other than the top leader who went and spoke to RNC. Anyway, there's this big mess, and then what you've had happening since then is that local union chapters, if you like, of the Teamsters have broken with not endorsing Harris as a kind of, or Trump as a national statement, and have gone and endorsed Harris separately. And there's been a whole load of these local Teamsters union groups backing Harris despite that national union refusal to endorse. And I think it's interesting. Now, just in the context, so Sam Stein and Tim Miller here from the Bulwark, conservatives who are backing Harris, talk about this, but what they're starting in this section by talking about is this the trend for special elections. So special elections are called when, I don't know, someone dies or someone's unable to run or whatever. And you have to have an election whereby, in the UK, we call this a by-election, whereby you are voting for a congressman or a senator, but usually someone in the House of Representatives. You are voting for someone out of the usual election cycle. And what's been interesting about the last year, really, is that each of these special elections have massively skewed Democrat. And this is interesting data. And we're going to talk about this in a little while, because it's real life data. It's not polling. It's not going out and saying, okay, here's 2,000 people. Who would you vote for? Okay, we'll try and predict the election on that. It's actual elections that have taken place. And they have skewed Democrats +7, +10, +8, +6, over and above what the polling was suggesting. So if you're looking at special elections, then you should be very much buoyed by that if you're a Democrat, because all of the special elections have massively skewed Democrat in the last year. And that, anyway, that's to give you the context of where he starts here.
On the one hand, I like these special election results because they are real life examples of what elections can be, and maybe foreshadow some larger elections, right? I mean, I know you're not supposed to read too much into them, but if you get enough data points, that's helpful. And through the past year or two, we've had a successive number of special elections that have really broken in the Democratic Party's favor. Yeah. So that's interesting. Two is the college educated stuff. Like that seems very true. Like the real fault line has been education levels in this country.
So why I'm bringing this excerpt in, because he's talking about this special election in New Jersey that skewed, was it Democrat +7 or something, over and above where they thought it was, something like that. Anyway, it's just a really big surprise, or maybe not if you've been looking at special elections. And as he said, it could foreshadow the national election whereby we're undercounting Democrat support. But he said one of the cohorts was educated, I think it was college educated white voters. And that is a demographic where the Democrats do better. And there is this, like I talked to you before about urban-rural divide, there is an education divide as well, which kind of can overlay the urban-rural divide as well. If you're college educated, you're more likely to be working in a corporate job or some kind of job that isn't in a small farming community, right? So there is an education overlay to the rural-urban divide. And so when we try to work out why the Teamsters didn't break in a way that we thought they might for the pro-union party, it might have something to do with that kind of speaks also to the purchase of immigration on these people as well, in terms of how important that is seen to be.
The partisan fault line has been education in this country ever since Trump burst onto the scene. That can work in two ways, though, right? Like, I think the news yesterday that kind of shocked me and you, according to our Slack conversations, was the Teamsters, international Teamsters, deciding to not endorse. But it wasn't just that; it was the poll. I know there's some question about the methodology of the poll, but whatever. The poll showed that
of their members
showed that they had gone from something like +8 for Biden to -17 for Harris. Right. And that to me is whoa, white working class, predominantly white, not exclusively white, working class men who are not sold on her. And is that sort of the canary in the coal mine here? Is that the thing that, Harris is really going to end up losing those marginal gains that Biden made? And we know that Trump's really invested in turning out those people. That's the game for him. So yeah, reason to be optimistic, reason to be pessimistic. There's just tons of data points.
It's just the thing that worries me. It's just that it's a bad trade. It's a good trade for Democrats and special.
So that is definitely a worry for the Democrats. A white working class, a non-college educated male particularly, is a demographic that Trump is going to do much better on. And how are the Democrats going to deal with that? Is a question that I think we need to see a really good answer from the Democrats. If one is to want the Democrats to win, the Democrats would need to have a real good plan. And that's why you're seeing Tim Walz and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden go around these battleground states and to these working class areas that are super important to try and hit them and to pick up on that vote and to try and shift the needle a little bit in their favor with those white working class voters.
Hyperbole. Let's just listen to this.
Now I am going to go to talking about immigration. So that's where we're going to go for. And by the way, just on the union side, IRS union is announced that they are endorsing Harris. So local Teamsters endorsing Harris after the national union doesn't do so, but the IRS union is endorsing Harris. So that's an important one. Now we're going to go back to Sam Stein and Tim Miller here, because there's an interesting talk about immigration. So talking about how important immigration is to the Republicans. We have had this situation whereby JD Vance has been called out for talking about eating cats and dogs and the Springfield, Ohio Haitian immigrants community being maligned, right? And he's been called out a number of times and fact-checked by saying these are not illegal immigrants, these are legal immigrants. Can you stop calling them illegal immigrants when they clearly aren't? And this is what he had to say in public.
Media loves to say that the Haitian migrants, hundreds of thousands of them, by the way, 20,000 in Springfield, but hundreds of thousands of them all across our country, they are here legally. And what they mean is that Kamala Harris used two separate programs, mass parole and temporary protective status. She used two programs to wave a wand and to say, we're not going to deport those people here. Well, if Kamala Harris waves the wand illegally and says these people are now here legally, I'm still going to call them an illegal alien.
Right, as these guys are going to go on to say, you just can't do that. That's not waving a wand. That's literally the legal framework with which they get defined as being legal or illegal. You can't just reinvent the labeling there just because you've been called out on falsely claiming these guys are illegal. It is really disingenuous. He's basically saying, I can define what I like. As long as it's useful for me, you guys don't get to do that. I get to do that. And if these guys are illegal immigrants, then they're illegal. In fact, I'm going to say that every black person is a criminal because I get to define what criminal is, and it just so happens I'm defining it as just any black person. Like, that's obviously insane. Now, that's the sort of thing that's going on here, which is like, I want to demonize a certain subsect of society, and I'm going to do that by labeling them something. And when I'm called out on that being factually incorrect, I'm saying, but I get to redefine the label there, not you. So stick that in your pipe and smoke it.
Fuck you, JD Vance.
Perfectly timed. I didn't plan that. Just that is how I feel.
I'm still gonna call these people an illegal alien just because I don't agree with TPS. Like what? I mean, like his kids are mixed race. I just don't understand how he lives with himself.
So what he's then going to go on and talk about, Tim Miller, here is the fact that JD Vance's children are mixed race, and he has married. I don't know her background, but I know she's of Asian descent there, and so he's always skirting close to the edge in terms of what he should be saying regarding his own personal situation.
It's like, what would JD Vance do if somebody went up to him and was like, you know what, JD, I hear you that Usha came here.
That's
legally,
his wife.
But I'm still going to call her an illegal alien because to me, whatever the system was, it wasn't right. And I'm freelancing and I think that she's an illegal alien. So that's what I'm going to call her.
Yeah, this one really like sucks to watch. Honestly, it sucks because you know that the people who are on the receiving end of this are probably some of the most disadvantaged people on the globe. I mean, they come from a country, one of the most impoverished countries in the world that was hit with a devastating earthquake. They came to this country legally. They didn't, they didn't sneak in. They came legally. They came looking for work. All they want is an opportunity. And for this person to use the stage he's been granted and the power that he has been bequeathed to stigmatize, to demagogue, to make their lives harder, not easier, really shows you something about both the priorities, but also I would just add, and I know this is not a terribly unique insight, it's offensive to the Republican electorate that he plays down to this type of politics for them. He's made the
and that's all very interesting. And the question is, how does that play? How does that play in terms of attracting the votes? Like I often say to you, it's about the centre ground. It's about the independents. It's about the people in the middle. It's about the swing voters. It's about the Republicans or the Democrats that you want to steal from the other side, so on and so forth. And I think Catty K from The Rest Is Politics US here sums it up the best. Is how does that kind of rhetoric play with the electorate?
It doesn't help America, and I don't think it helps American society. It doesn't help people's confidence in democracy. And then the question is, does it help Trump and Vance win the election? Well, does it win them over any wavering voters? I would suspect most people who buy the theory, and the polls suggest not that many do, or even like the way that they're talking about this, we're already going to vote for Donald Trump. I think they've lost. I mean, the degree to which this is an online parody can't be overstated. The memes are wild about cats and dogs and the ridiculousness of all of this. And I think people see it for what it is. And whilst JD Vance is trying to say, look, I've now actually finally got you talking about immigration, actually, they've really only got people talking about how absurd this is and how there's no truth behind these stories. I think it's lost them a week. I mean, they don't have much time between now and election day. And maybe they've given up on trying to reach people in the middle. Maybe they've given up on trying to reach undecided voters. But this doesn't seem to me the best way to reach undecided voters. I mean, this is not what Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles run, right? I mean, maybe this is a Corey Lewandowski play and a JD Vance play, and you go for the base and you go as low as you possibly can to get what they think worked for them in 2016. But I don't know. What's your sense? Does it help them electorally?
Well, and the answer for him is not really. So I think that's the only question that we need to ask, which is when anything happens, like whether it's Mark Robinson, whether it's this, whether it's that, what effect does this have on the voters, particularly those in the middle, independents, undecided, and disaffected voters from the other team. You know, how does this play with those? Because those are the only people that are going to shift. Everyone else has died in the wool, and they are going to vote Republican or Democrat. So something like this, will it shift them? And if you go so far into the cats and dogs, if you go, like, immigration is a really important issue that a lot of people find is the defining issue, arguably, for many. But if you go too hard on that and become too, like, if you lose all sense of compassion, then you are going to lose some of those people you otherwise would have gained. So it's about being optimal with the topic of immigration or any given topic, and thinking about not overdoing it so that you lose that moral high ground and become sort of fascistic. And speaking of which, and again, it's always the question, how does this affect those groups we talked about? So Trump has then come out in public and blamed Jews if he loses the November election, accusing them of voting for the enemy. And this has gone down really, really badly. If I don't win this election, he said, and the Jewish people would really have a lot to do with it if that happens, because at 40%, that means 60% of the people are voting for the enemy, Trump said. He added that Jewish individuals who plan to vote for his opponents should have their head examined. I find it hard to believe. Part of it is a habit, I think. And then he says, you know, with all I've done for Israel, I received only 24% of the Jewish vote, he said, arguing that he would be polling 100% if it were not for the Democrats. Hold or curse on you. Really interesting. And actually, when you look at his rhetoric on this, you can see his real transactional nature. So he's talked before about, like, I did this for Israel. Like, I moved the embassy to Jerusalem. I did this, and all I got was 2% from you Jews. Like, what's going on there? Thank you very much, or no thank you very much type thing. He's really angry about the lack of support he's received from the Jewish community, given what he sees as things that he did to try and attract that vote share. And this is really riled up a lot of people. Anti-Defamation League, ADL, blast Trump. He said yesterday Jewish Americans would be a leading cause of his electoral loss if they didn't vote for him in December. Quote, preemptively blaming American Jews for your potential election loss does zero to help American Jews. It increases their sense of alienation in a moment of vulnerability when right-wing extremists and left-wing anti-Zionists continually demonize and slander Jews, the ADL said in a statement. So this is really interesting because actually they're quite right here. Like, this is an area where if Trump played it correctly, he could actually have quite a positive effect on his vote share. So he could play into the pro-Israel, foreign policy, Hamas, Gaza, etc. There are votes to be won there if you play it right. And these are people who are feeling quite vulnerable at the moment because those on the far right who are anti-Semitic are against them, and those on the far left who are pro-Gaza and sometimes pro-Hamas are against them. And so they're thinking, yeah, we need a home at the moment. Who's going to provide us a home? And you got Trump coming along and saying, if you don't vote for me, it's the Jews' fault that we lose the election. So they're thinking, well, screw you, Trump. Yeah, so you've got to play it carefully, and he just hasn't done that. Anyway, also there's been a CNN invitation to a first debate on CNN for Trump-Harris. Of course, there was the Biden-Trump debate. And now CNN have put an invitation out for another debate. Now, Kamala Harris has accepted. Donald Trump has turned it down. And I think that tells you all you need to know about how well that last debate went and how much of a risk Trump thinks, or Trump's team thinks, because I think Trump would be up for that. I've no doubt that he would be up for debating Harris again, but his team are playing damage limitation there. Now, talking about, I should have probably played this just after JD Vance made his claims about, relabeling terms and making up stuff without any justification for that. Here we have Representative Glenn Grothman.
Why did all but 3 Democrats vote against a provision yesterday that you have to prove that you're a citizen before you vote? I mean, isn't that a bizarre vote to take? But that is sadly where the Democrat Party is right now. They can't wait a few years until some of these new immigrants become citizens, or until they have children, they become citizens. The Democrat Party is so radical right now that they want these people voting immediately.
This is part of the great replacement theory, which is Democrats just want loads of immigrants because they're more likely to vote for them, and they want to replace all the white voters with immigrant Democratic voters. Is kind of sort of the theory. He's kind of speaking to that here. And then the C-SPAN host says the following.
And if they don't want them to vote, fine. Just have them show they're citizens.
Well, what's the evidence that it's happening? Where have you seen that?
Well, I haven't seen it, but we know it's happening, right? We know. Why did all...
It's great. Have you got any evidence? Well, I haven't got evidence, but we've seen it, right? Trust me, bro. It's happening. I haven't got the evidence. Well, yeah, okay, but how do you know it's happening if you don't have the evidence? Well, because I just said it. It's happening. I said it's happening, so therefore it's happening. All right? So, and that's why we're trying to make all these rules to stop it happening. Yeah, but is it happening? Yeah, it's happening. And we're making these rules to stop that happening. Okay, sure thing. Okay, then we have Marjorie Taylor Greene saying Donald Trump stuns America with a record-breaking massive rally in New York, and playing images from that rally. Massive record-breaking rally. New York is turning red, and there's nothing Kamala Harris can do about it. New York wants change, so on and so forth. Okay, so the bigger picture is, going back to the question of why you do anything, what's it going to do? How's it going to swing the needle? How's it going to shift the needle? So what the Democrats have done is they've gone to difficult places in battleground states that by shifting the needle a little bit in that particular district, in this particular state, and we are going to a place where there are more Republicans here, if we can shift that needle 2% in our favor by campaigning here, then that could shift that district, which might eventually shift this state, and that will have an effect. So we're going to go to parts of Pennsylvania where we are looking at the Republicans. We're going to go to Georgia like they did as soon as they went on the campaign trail after the DNC. They went to Georgia. Let's go to some of these districts that are leaning Republican and see if we can change that by 1 or 2%, because this is about shifting the needle in important places. Now, that Republicans would have you believe that is what Trump's decision was, to go to a part of New York to play to an audience there. Now, he played to a Republican audience in New York, in a place where that actually skews a little bit Republican. And people are saying, why are you going to New York? New York is going to stay Democrat. That is a wasted opportunity. But Marjorie Taylor Greene here is like, record-breaking, massive rally in New York. New York's turning red. There's nothing Kamala Harris can do about it. New York wants change. This is massive. And actually, it wasn't. It's a waste of time. This is the difference between the two campaigns, is that I think Trump is playing to his narcissism and going to a particular place in New York that's going to give him some New York Republican. He's a New Yorker. That's why he's gone there. He makes him feel good. And then you start getting footage of that same campaign, but looking at the upper tier here. So this is Jonathan Howard giving
And energy dominance. That's what we have, energy dominance.
So this is during the campaign, and this is someone in that top tier filming the audience while Trump is speaking. And actually, when you look at that top tier, the top tier is not very full at all. So the kind of record-breaking, massive, packed out this auditorium, or whatever place it is in New York, is actually not what is being claimed by the Marjorie Taylor Greene, and not what's being thought of. Now, this is in stark contrast, because it is the case that the Harris campaign is filling out the stadiums, and some pretty big ones. As someone says here, this is not a rave or a concert. This is a 10,000 person stadium in Madison, Wisconsin right now, as they wait for Kamala Harris at her rally. People are dancing, having fun, and fired up for Kamala Harris. Truly an incredible thing to watch. House of Pain. Awesome. You know, that's what you want. People jumping up, jumping up and down. They're having some fun. You're building up this sense of excitement. You don't have people saying you can't use our music because we think you suck. Everyone seems to be saying you can use our music because we endorse you. So there's an implicit endorsement there going on from cultural icons. And you have a lot of noise and a lot of excitement, and places are genuinely filled to the rafters. Whereas Trump claims they're filled, but then the evidence comes out later that they're not, and that really irritates him. And then during, I think, is it the New York one here that he does this at? So let's go and listen to Trump here.
Further left tonight, let me also deliver a message straight to Kamala Harris. Have you heard of her?
Again, fails to pronounce her name correctly on purpose.
Who, by the way, was just rated by far the most...
Was just rated by far. So this has just happened, right? Kamala Harris, what he's going to tell us now is fresh news. This has just happened. She was just rated...
the most liberal senator in the U.S. Senate. More so even further left than Bernie Sanders and Pocahontas.
So, calling Elizabeth Warren a childish name there, and Bernie Sanders. So he's saying that Kamala Harris has just been voted the most liberal senator, more liberal than Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. She hasn't been a senator since she was made vice president, right? She is not a senator and hasn't been a senator for 4 years. What are you talking about? Like, either you're having a brain fart or you're just overtly lying. And either way, it's despicable. Now, I'm going to leave this up here. This is at Sarah Huckabee Sanders' town hall type event, which was, in my opinion, an absolute disaster for him. This is the sort of sense he's making at the moment.
She said, I don't think I've ever said this before. So we do these rallies. They're massive rallies. Everybody stays till the end, by the way. You know, when she said that, well, your rallies, people leave. Honestly, nobody does. And if I saw them leaving, I'd say, and ladies and gentlemen, make America great again, and I'd get the hell out, okay? Because I don't want people leaving. But I do have to say, so I give these long, sometimes very complex sentences and paragraphs, but they all come together. I do it a lot. I do it with Raising Cane, that story. I do it with the story on the catapults on the aircraft carriers. I do it with a lot of different stories. When I mention Dr. Hannibal Lecter, I'm using that as an example of people that are coming in from Silence of the Lambs. I use it. They say, it's terrible. So they say, so I'll give this long, complex area. For instance, that I talked about a lot of different territory. The bottom line is, I said, the most important thing. We're going to bring more plants into your state and this country to make automobiles. We're going to be bigger than before. But the fake news, there's a lot of them back there. You know, for a town hall, there's a lot of people. But the fake news likes to say, oh, he was rambling. No.
Again, he is literally rambling about rambling. Like, this is an absolute rambling dirge of nonsense that is just a waste of time. Like, you should be out there thinking about every word, about the cadence of your speech, about every demographic you want to reach, and how every sentence is punctuated and punchy and in a way that it's appealing to those people. But he's just rambling about rambling.
Oh, no, that's not rambling. That's genius, when you can connect the dots. You got to... Now, Sarah, if you couldn't connect the dots, you got a problem. But every dot was connected, and many stories were told in that little paragraph.
What are you banging on about? And the idea that Hannibal Lecter, he mentions that as just a crap joke. It's like a joke that you hear and so, oh, that's funny, I'm going to use, he'll have you for dinner. Don't, I get it. Yeah, he's a cannibal. Right. Okay. I'm going to tell that all my rallies. And then when people call him out on telling that joke at his rallies, he then has to go, well, there's got to be a reason I say it. So then he starts trying to make it supposedly relate to issues of immigration and it's just like, no, what are you doing? Anyway, he's still worrying about people leaving his rallies and claims it doesn't happen, yet he's just given a rally at Wilmington, North Carolina, and 28 minutes into his speech, so there's another 40 minutes to go here.
But take nothing for granted.
So he's speaking there, and you've got just lines and lines of people leaving. So, okay, people leaving Israeli, whatever, but stop lying about it. And also, why are people spending that time and effort to get to a rally, queue up to go in, and then leave after 28 minutes? Like, what does that say? Is it the bouncing, exciting place that it could be? No. Right, Matt Gaetz, I'm just going to include this because this is absolutely delightful. Matt Gaetz is being investigated by the Ethics Committee on like sex trafficking and underage sex with, well, I don't want to talk about things too explicitly because I'll get myself wrapped on the knuckles, but this is just brilliant from someone asking him a question in the audience.
You've ever been with, and have you run down the Lolita Express? I know that.
I forget the second part of what he says, but what's the youngest schoolgirl? What's the age of the youngest schoolgirl you've been with, or something like that?
What's the youngest schoolgirl you've ever been? What's the youngest schoolgirl you've ever been with, and have you run down the Lolita Express? I know that Donald Trump.
And it's absolutely spot on. What's the youngest schoolgirl you've been with? And then he gets hustled away. I mean, some people are laughing because actually they recognise it's pretty on point. Other people, boo, but that's horrible. I can't believe you would ask him such a thing. Why not? It's the sort of thing he does need to be asked. Anyway, right, there's another example of how Trump is financially in trouble. There are some claims that senators are bankrupt at the moment in terms of campaigning. There are certain Senate races that are like, we got no money. He's trying to sell more and more stuff. This is the sort of thing that we're seeing all the time at the moment with Trump.
Hello, everyone. I have something incredible to share today. We are announcing the launch of Trump coins, a true symbol of American greatness. Trump coins are designed by me and minted right here in the USA. This beautiful limited edition coin commemorates our movement, our fight for freedom, prosperity, and putting America first. We always put America first. It's more than just a collector's item. It's a testament to the resilience and strength of the American people. And
so on and so forth. He's trying to sell more stuff. He's trying to grift off the back of his assassinations with assassination trainers and stuff. This, he says, has got his very beautiful face on. But he's pretty desperate. And I think it just shows that they need some fundraising. But you're not going to make a massive difference with selling $100 coins, really. There is also the weird decision to have started up a Bitcoin, started up a type of Bitcoin. Why would you, just going in to be the president of the US, decide that just as you're doing your campaign is the right time to do a Trump Bitcoin? Surely there's going to be like conflicts of interest. It just absolutely beggars belief, the decisions this guy makes. And yeah, another example of saying that here every job produced in this country over the last 2 years has gone to illegal aliens. Every job. It's just like, and supporters shouting, save us, save us. It's just, again, I talk about this idea that he's just overtly lying. Like 100% of jobs 100% in the last 2 years have not gone to illegal aliens. It's not only wrong, it's just vastly, vastly wrong. Like, 100% of jobs have gone to illegal aliens. It's not even... It's so stupid. I don't know. And yet that's the sort of rhetoric that gets people saying, save us, save us. He needs to be called out on that. That is dangerous, and it's just... another example of lying in such a way as to be really, really dangerous. You're setting a precedent for just being able to lie willy-nilly. Now, you might be wondering, when you see Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband, go on a campaign trail, do these amazing events where he's really sort of doing a good job to garner support for Kamala Harris and her ticket, what is Trump's wife doing?
Why do I stand proudly behind my nude modeling work? The more pressing question is, why has the media chosen to scrutinize my celebration of the human form in a fashion photo shoot? Are we no longer able to appreciate the beauty of the human body? Throughout history, master artists have revered the human shape, evoking profound emotions and admiration.
So she's talking about nude modelling because she's trying to sell a book. She failed to mention her nude photos expose. she failed to mention her nude photos expose, a gap in her immigration story. The photo shoot was in New York City in 1995, and she couldn't legally work in the US until 1996 when she got her H-1B visa. So if you talk about illegal immigrants here, illegal aliens, yeah, you might want to look at your wife there and what's she doing not campaigning for you. It's just absolutely incredible. Anyway, I've gone through that one already. Now, I just on the illegal aliens again, let's just do another J.D. Vance clip.
From the Republican governor of Ohio to the Republican mayor of Springfield to the city manager has debunked them. But Vance says it's not his job to verify what comes out of his mouth. It's the media's.
You say that you have a responsibility to share what your constituents tell you, but don't you also have a responsibility to fact check them first?
Well, I think the media has a responsibility to fact check the residents of Springfield, not lie about them.
Man, has any public figure ever been more off-putting than J.D. Vance? I didn't think anyone could ever out-cruise Ted Cruz, but this son of a bitch did it. He's Ted Cruz 2.0, less nasal, more eyeliner. That, by the way, JD, that's exactly what the media's been doing. They fact-check the pet-eating lies. You're the one who repeated them anyway. You don't get to just lie and then tell everyone else it's their job to fact-check your BS. Can you imagine that standard in any other context? All right, class, today we're going to be learning about how Finland invented spaghetti during the Revolutionary War. Oh, Mr. Vance, I don't think that's true. Hey, it's not my job to check if it's true. It's a student's job. In fact, the Wall Street Journal reported that the Springfield city...
So, and it's a good little snippet there, and he goes on, and it amazes me that you've got to this point where you can lie, and then when you're caught out for lying, in this case about illegal immigrants, you're saying, right, this is a lie, and we've done this by fact-checking as a newspaper, but also the governor's come out and said it's a lie, or it's not true, and the Springfield police department have come out and said it's not true, and the city mayor and whatever. Okay, so instead of J.D. Vance going, oh yeah, sorry about that, I won't do that in future. He goes, it's not my job to fact check me. It's your job to fact. It's like, no, it's your responsibility not to lie and to make sure you're trying really hard not to lie. Because otherwise you can just go around lying willy-nilly, like I've said earlier, about anyone and anything and be incredibly dangerous in so doing. So anyway, there you go. Now, when it comes to polls, we have seen, so I'm just going to finish off now. Harris has seen the largest favourability increase for any politician since Bush post 9/11. She has gone into the positive at the moment. So the Beast reports compared to July when Harris had a 32% approval and a 50% disapproval, so that's a negative 18. The new poll finds a 48% of respondents view her positively and 45% negatively. So that's negative 18 to a plus 3. That is a 21-point shift, which is absolutely incredible. So you can see what's happening here, and what that coincides with is when she announced herself as running and then got on TV lots. So there's this evidence-based conclusion that the more Harris shows herself to the nation, the more popular she becomes. It's a case of the people needing to know her more. She needs to introduce herself, and when she does, people like her. That is what the data shows. So she needs to make sure she's on TV as much as possible. And some are arguing Trump, it's the other way around. The more he shows himself, like when he was not on Twitter and when he was out of the public kind of discourse, people had forgotten about, there's this, and well, he wasn't so unpopular. There's this kind of amnesia that takes place where people forgive him his craziness, but then when he comes back and shoves his craziness down our throats, people are like, oh, actually no, you're a bit nuts. So for him, you could argue it goes in the opposite direction, but for her, certainly the more people know her, the better it is for her polls. So anyway, lots of polls trending in her direction. So this is a Fox News poll. This is a 20-point swing. August the 8th, Trump was winning 51-43 against Harris. September the 16th, Harris is 51 to Trump's 39. That's Fox News poll plus 12 for Harris. Absolutely incredible. And all these polls are kind of showing this. And I think that's really significant. Past 24 hours have featured some of the best polling for Harris. This was back a few days ago, though. Harris has a clear path to 270, clearer than she's ever had. And then special elections have been taking place, which is something that I was talking about earlier.
In relation to this district, saying that because it's a safe district, there was never an expectation here that Republicans would overperform. But I want you to look back at those 2024 elections and even the 2023 elections, where you can see that in some of these safer districts, right, Democrats outperforming isn't just something that matters in swing districts. It matters in every district because it is a net overperformance average here the Democrats keep the upper hand in. When you take a look at some of these districts here, Democrats ended up doing better in almost every single one, even if the district was safe or not. We talked about Ted Kennedy's race in the 2024 special election that took place in the state of New York. I believe that was the 26th district. Overall, though, that special election, what it resulted in was Democrats doing even better. And we were able to draw a level of connection from 2022 and 2024 up until now. And so what does this mean for Kamala Harris's candidacy? What does this mean for the overall state of the race? Well, I think that while we shouldn't be reading too much into any one special election, a collection of special elections does help lead what we come to understand about this election.
So, it's a data point. It's an important, interesting data point to look at. Now, the question is often about polls, though. Like, are they wrong? Are they accurate? Are they wrong? We had polls in 2020 that undercounted Trump, but then we had polls in 2022 that undercounted the Democrats. So it depends how you look at these polls at the moment.
Tighter in these battleground states. Look, in the Great Lakes, you got Harris by 2 in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, well within the margin of error. How about in the Sun Belt, though? It's even tighter. You got a 1-point race in Nevada favoring Kamala Harris. You got a less than 1-point race in North Carolina, Trump ahead, but we're talking about like 0.2 percentage points. Arizona, a 1-point advantage. Georgia, a 1-point advantage for Donald Trump. The race, very, very close. Now, let's just say the polls were exactly right. What does that mean for the electoral map? Well, it would mean a really tight race. Look at this. Kamala Harris getting 276 electoral votes to Donald Trump.
So right now, on the poll from a few days ago, it has Harris winning 276 to 262. But are those polls accurate? And that's what he's asked
the
here.
realm of playing the hypotheticals.
Yes.
So let's do that.
Yes, I love those.
Comparing how, if the polling is off, if the polling is off like it was in 2020, what would that do to the electoral map?
So look at Donald Trump's electoral vote total right now, if the polls are exactly right, 262. But let's say the polls are off like they were back in 2020. Look where he goes. He goes to 312. Why is that? Because the polls underestimated Donald Trump in 2020. So the bottom line is, instead of losing those Great Lake battleground states, he wins all of them. He obviously holds on to North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, and he gains Nevada. So if the polls are as good as they were in 2020, despite the fact that at this particular hour, Donald Trump trails in enough states to give Kamala Harris the victory, if the polls are off like they were in 2020, Donald Trump would actually win the election.
There were big elections since 2020 that involved 2022 midterms. What if it was off? Then now compare it to the polling offage of 2022.
Look, I think a lot of people are focusing on the 2020 polling, Aaron, believing, oh, the polls always underestimate Republicans. Not always, because look at what happens if the polls are off like they were in 2022. Well, Kamala Harris goes from losing that election to winning it with 319 electoral votes. Why? Because the polls underestimated Democrats in 2022. So Kamala Harris gets back all of these Great Lake battleground states, but she adds to her column North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. So the bottom line is this race is way too close to call, and the past elections show us it's way too close to call because polls are a tool. They are not Nostradamus.
And that's why it's interesting to go and look at these special elections, but then they might not be completely predictive of future voting in a national election, presidential election. So that's one data point. We look at the 2020 polls. They skewed, they undercounted Trump. 2022 polls undercounted Democrats. So who knows? Who knows at the moment? In terms of endorsement, we've still got lots of people. So 17 former staffers for Ronald Reagan have come out and have endorsed Kamala Harris. What else? More than a dozen Reagan alumni there. There's a newspaper article from The Hill. We also have over 100 ex-GOP officials endorsing Harris. Here's the full list, and that's in Forbes. There's still this movement of sort of Reagan Republicans and disaffected Republicans moving towards the Democrats, and that's like who's doing a better job of nicking the middle, the swing voters, the undecided, the independents, and people from the other side. I would argue at the moment that's the Democrats. Former Republican Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, said he will not be voting for Trump. Character is too important to me, and the presidency is a job that requires the kind of character that he just doesn't have. I'm going to write in a Republican. So he's not going to vote Harris, and then some people criticizing these Republicans for doing that, not voting Trump, but not voting Harris. I think George Bush has come out, and I think he's not going to be voting Trump, but he's not said he's going to be voting for Harris. Nikki Haley's Iowa campaign chair is endorsing Kamala Harris. So that's another one from a former presidential candidate there, Nikki Haley. Should someone who has been convicted of a felony be allowed to be president? Well, one poll says 57% say no, 23% yes, 20% undecided. Well, that's interesting because there must be an awful lot of Republicans who are going to vote for Trump, but who also believe that a felon shouldn't be a president. So they must therefore think that he is not actually a felon, and then that was some kind of unfair conviction, so on and so forth. And then, I'll leave you with Let's Talk Elections kind of synopsis on where the polls are at the moment in their great alignment. Times Siena poll notwithstanding that's just come out.
And in many cases, they do so accurately. But a lot of forecasts, and many of these forecasts, rarely ever do coincide to a point where they are nearly spot on in terms of what states they expect Kamala Harris to win, spot on in terms of, how they win. The fact is, we are seeing an alignment of these forecasting models that is very, very clear. I mean, it is something that I really can't separate from because I don't even think that we're at a point where they are disagreeing with us at really any of the reputable polling or major prediction firms. And the consensus map is building. The consensus map is building that Kamala Harris wins the White House through the Rust Belt region and through Nevada. The consensus is building that across all of these different sites, people with different backgrounds, people with different experiences, people with different models, people with different funders, and whatever it might be, all of them arrive at the same conclusion. One, that Kamala Harris wins the presidency. The second conclusion is that she wins the presidency through a unique electoral pathway that relies on the blue wall staying the blue wall, and the state of Nevada reverting to its electoral history and electoral path of being a pretty strong Democratic state. Republicans haven't won it on the presidential level since 2004. Not even Donald Trump in 2016 had enough enthusiasm and a shock factor that he was able to shift the state of Nevada. Didn't shift that much from Barack Obama, and between 2016 and 2020, stayed roughly even for that of the Democratic Party. Something that likely contributes to the model's forecasting across of them that say that Kamala Harris has the upper hand in Nevada. Ultimately, I think that this map is the most probable one today. I think North Carolina is a bit more iffy than we let on, especially with Mark Robinson in the fray. But ultimately, these forecasting models give us a very similar conclusion for a variety of different reasons. And I think they're right. The Kamala Harris has the narrow upper hand. This race is still very much a toss-up. But if the election was held today, I'd call her the winner. And I think she'd win these three states, Nevada, and I'd still throw in North Carolina, but only by a very, very narrow margin. Beyond that, right now, Kamala Harris is in a position where she can expand on states that Biden won in 2020, might lose some states that Biden won in 2020. Ultimately, though, she still maintains that very narrow advantage that puts her as the victor of this year's presidential election.
And there you go. So really so close still, so much to play for. Polling inaccuracies could be pretty problematic, but considering there is so much alignment with the polls at the moment, where we are seeing so many polls in favor of Harris, you would have to be feeling better about being in the Harris campaign at the moment than being in the Trump campaign, especially when you've got potential October surprises that may come out, and you've got a war chest. The Democrats have got a war chest that far, far outstrips the amount of money that the Republicans have to spend. Anyway, that's enough for me. Way too long. Take care. Speak soon. Toodle pits.